The morning sun filtered through the pine trees, casting long shadows across the dusty trail, where Martha found herself in the worst predicament of her 32 years of life. Her wrists, burned from the rough rope that bound them, and her ankles were tied to stakes driven deep into the forest floor. She had been traveling alone from Silver Creek to visit her sister in Riverside when 3 men on horseback had surrounded her wagon 2 days prior. They had taken everything she owned, including her late mother's silver locket, and left her here in this clearing, bound and terrified. The sound of hoofbeats made her heart race with fresh fear. Through her tangled dark hair, she could see a lone rider approaching on a chestnut mare. He was a tall man in his mid-50s, wearing a worn leather vest and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his weathered face. As he drew closer, she could see the lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent under the open sky and the silver threading through his brown beard. "Please," she called out, and her voice cracked from thirst and exhaustion. "Please untie me, I beg you." The man dismounted slowly, and his boots made soft thuds against the ground as he approached. He knelt beside her, and Martha noticed. His hands were calloused and strong, but his eyes held a gentleness that made something tight in her chest loosen just slightly. "Easy now," he said in a voice that reminded her of her father. "You're safe now." His name was William Carter, and he owned a cattle ranch about 5 miles east of where they were. He had been tracking the men who did this for the better part of a week after they had stolen horses from his property, as William worked at the knots binding her wrists. Martha noticed how careful he was not to cause her any additional pain. When her hands came free, she gasped at the sudden rush of blood returning to her fingers. "This might hurt a bit," he warned gently before working on the ropes around her ankles, true to his word. The sensation was painful, but Martha bit her lip and endured it. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled beneath her. William caught her easily and helped her sit against a nearby tree trunk. From his saddlebag, he produced a canteen of water and a cloth. "Small sips," he instructed as he handed her the water. "Your body needs time to adjust." The water was cool and clean, and Martha had never tasted anything so wonderful in her entire life. While she drank, William wet the cloth and, without a word, began gently cleaning the dirt and dried blood from the cuts on her arms. His touch was so tender it brought tears to her eyes. "My wagon," she whispered. "They took everything. We'll find it," William assured her. "But first we need to get you somewhere, safe and warm." He lifted her dress slightly to examine her ankles, and that was when he saw the deep rope burns that had formed there. His jaw tightened, but his hands remained gentle as he wrapped them with clean bandages from his pack. "I have a salve at the ranch that will help with the healing," he said. "My late wife Sarah used to make it from herbs she grew in her garden." There was a softness in his voice when he mentioned his wife, and Martha understood immediately that he was a man who had known love and loss. William helped Martha onto his horse and climbed up behind her. She was so weak that she leaned back against his solid frame as they rode. He kept one arm around her waist to steady her, and occasionally he would ask if she was all right. The ranch appeared as they crested a hill, and Martha saw a sprawling property with a white farmhouse that had a wide porch and flower boxes beneath the windows. There were several outbuildings and a large barn, and she could see cattle grazing in the distant fields. A woman in her early 50s emerged from the house as they approached. She had kind eyes and salt and pepper hair pulled back in a practical bun. "William," she called out with concern evident in her voice. "What's happened?" "This is my sister-in-law, Dorothy," William explained as he helped Martha down. "Dorothy, this young lady has been through quite an ordeal." Dorothy took one look at Martha's condition and immediately went into action. She wrapped a supportive arm around Martha's waist and guided her toward the house. "You poor dear," Dorothy murmured. "Let's get you inside and cleaned up properly." The house was warm and smelled of fresh bread and coffee. Dorothy led Martha to a bedroom that was simply furnished but spotlessly clean. There was a handmade quilt on the bed and lace curtains at the window. "I'll heat some water for a bath," Dorothy said, "and I'll find you some clean clothes." As Dorothy bustled about preparing everything, Martha sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to cry. All the fear and pain and uncertainty of the past 2 days came pouring out. Dorothy returned and without hesitation sat beside Martha and held her while she sobbed. "You let it all out, honey," Dorothy said, softly. "You're safe here and no one is going to hurt you anymore." The bath was heaven, and Dorothy had added some kind of soothing oil to the water that smelled of lavender afterward. Martha dressed in a simple cotton dress that had belonged to Sarah. It fit reasonably well and was clean and soft against her skin. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found William and Dorothy in the kitchen. The table was set with 3 places, and there was a hearty stew simmering on the stove. "Sit," Dorothy instructed, gently. "You need to eat something." As they ate, Martha told them her story. She explained how she had been widowed 2 years prior, when her husband Thomas died in a logging accident. She had been living in Silver Creek working as a seamstress, but business had been slow. Her sister Emma had written to say there was work in Riverside, and Martha had decided to make the journey. "I had saved almost everything I owned," Martha said quietly. "It was all in that wagon." William and Dorothy exchanged a glance. "We'll help you find it," William said firmly. "But for now you need to rest and heal." "I can't impose on you like this," Martha protested weakly. "Nonsense," Dorothy said. "You'll stay here as long as you need to, and that's the end of it." Over the following days, Martha began to heal both physically and emotionally. Dorothy treated her rope burns with the salve William had mentioned, and the wounds began to close. Martha helped around the house as much as she was able, doing dishes and mending clothes, and assisting with meal preparation. She learned that Sarah had died 3 years earlier from pneumonia, and that William and Dorothy had been running the ranch together ever since Dorothy's husband had passed away a decade before, and she had nowhere else to go, so William had invited her to stay. They had formed a quiet companionship built on mutual loss and understanding. Martha also learned that William was a man of deep integrity. He rose before dawn each day to tend to the cattle and work the land. He was fair with his ranch hands and generous with neighbors who fell on hard times. In the evenings he would sit on the porch and play his harmonica while Dorothy knitted and Martha listened. The melodies were often melancholy but beautiful. One evening, after about a week had passed, William announced that he had found Martha's wagon. It had been abandoned about 15 miles south, with most of her belongings still inside. The next day he hitched up his own wagon and took Martha to retrieve her things. When she saw her mother's locket sitting on top of her trunk, Martha burst into tears. William stood at a respectful distance while she held the precious keepsake and allowed herself to grieve. "They're gone," William said quietly. "The men. Who did this, I mean?" Martha looked up at him. "Gone where?" "The sheriff caught up with them 2 towns over," he explained. "They'll face justice for what they did." The relief Martha felt was overwhelming. As they loaded her belongings into William's wagon, she found herself studying him. He was a good man, possibly the best man she had ever known aside from her own father. That evening back at the ranch, Martha approached William where he sat on the porch. "I need to continue on to Riverside," she said, though the words felt heavy. "My sister is expecting me." William nodded slowly. "When do you want to leave?" "I was thinking in a few days," Martha replied. "I need to repay you and Dorothy for everything you've done." "You don't owe us anything," William said firmly. "I owe you my life." Martha countered. William was quiet for a long moment. Finally he said, "My wife Sarah used to say that kindness isn't a debt to be repaid. It's a gift to be passed forward." Those words stayed with Martha that night as she lay in bed. She thought about the life she had planned in Riverside, and suddenly it seemed empty. Here on this ranch she had found something unexpected. She had found peace and purpose, and if she was honest with herself, she had found something else too. She had found that her heart could still feel warmth after years of cold grief. The next morning, Martha found Dorothy in the garden harvesting vegetables. "I need your advice," Martha said. Dorothy straightened up and brushed dirt from her hands. "About what, dear? Do you think it would be foolish of me to stay here?" Martha asked. "Instead of going to Riverside?" Dorothy smiled in a way that made her whole face light up. "I think that would be the wisest decision you could make." But I don't want William to think I'm taking advantage of his kindness, Martha said. Oh, honey. Dorothy laughed gently. That man has been happier in the past week than I've seen him in 3 years, and it's because of you. Martha felt her cheeks warm. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? Dorothy asked kindly. I've seen the way he looks at you when you're not watching, and I've seen the way you look at him too. That evening, Martha asked William if she could speak with him privately. They walked out to the fence line where they could watch the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I've been thinking about my plans, Martha began, and I wonder if perhaps I could stay here instead of going to Rye.